Testing audio 1 2 3. Testing audio 1 2 3. Well, this is just not just testing audio real quick here. We'll get start in a few seconds. All right, I can take those headphones off. This sounds pretty good. I've been using OBS and Streamlabs OBS specifically for streaming for those interested, and it's got like this integration for Pretzel, which is this audio-free like audio streaming app to give you background audio, and it doesn't work with a turd. I don't know what to say. It's just not working. I've tried a couple different things, and it just the audio either just fails altogether, and I would be more than happy to pay for a subscription service for it if it worked, but since it doesn't work, I'm not gonna necessarily put money into something that doesn't work. So that's been a pretty big bummer. So that's been trying to figure out the last couple minutes why the audio does not work on the stream, and I'm not really sure. Probably have to YouTube or Google it afterward. I'm gonna grab a quick water, and then I think we can get going here. All right. So most people are going to look at the video description and think I tricked you because there is Kotlin code that's showing on the screen, not Swift. And let me explain. Sorry about that. Got to keep hydrated. Today, on Mondays and Wednesdays on my stream, I'm going to be doing mobile development. Now, one thing I'm very interested in doing is that I very recently, wrote a pretty awesome, well, I wouldn't say it's awesome, it's okay, Kotlin app that is a demo app, and it's a inventory management system basically. And this uses Jetpack Compose. It uses all the latest cool things that Kotlin and Google have to offer on Android. What I'd like to do is port this application, or basically just rewrite it in Swift, in two flavors, one in UIKit and one in Swift UI, and then compare the two. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Visor, which is this app I use to show Android off, and I'm going to bring you this is what the app looks like. And we're going to try replicating this, or at least I'm going to try to replicate this on stream. So the first thing to show you is what the heck am I going to build? And that's going to be this thing right here. So it basically takes a user in. It will display projects, they're called. You can add a project to the system by clicking the plus sign, put a name in, select a location for the project, and a due date, and whatever that due date is, then we'll honor that, and you can save it, and it'd save it to a internal database in the application. So that's one cool thing it does. You can edit these by clicking the little overflow menu right here, these three periods. You can edit or delete. Now this is material design, of course. This is one thing that Google does pretty well with material. It also has kind of done a lot in like Facebook Mobile, for example. They have a lot of the cards and a lot of the material design look and feel. And so that's something in iOS we can semi-emulate it for the most part. But in iOS, usually the design's a little bit different. Like in iOS, for example, one option would be to swipe, the swipe to edit it versus, or swipe to delete, right? Swipe can bring up some edit options and stuff. And that's a little bit more popular in iOS than on Android. And so that may be one way I can fix that UI. But when you click on these, you can drill in to what we call audit, and you can add an audit in, and that's a bunch of inventory items. And so that's the kind of cool thing that the app does. Now, on top of that, we have a bunch of different options here. And in the developer screens, you can add sample data, or you can just delete the database altogether. It kind of gives you an idea of who you're logged in as, and a bunch of just developer nerdy kind of stuff. For example, if I want to load more sample data, I can just click this button. And now when I go to the home screen, it'll just show me more random data. And that's really cool if I want to test things like scrolling. Now, of course, I'm just trying to use my mouse to scroll, and it'd probably be easier to just grab the phone. This is a physical phone. You can see then when I flick with my fingers, scrolling is a lot faster, right? So that's on a physical device. I'm using ADB. That's the Android debugger with our, I think it's called Android debugger. ADB is what the command is, and you can basically set it up so you can wirelessly debug your application. And then Visor is a program I can use to display it. And actually Visor, if you get the Pro version, which costs a little bit of money, but it's actually worth it, you can also do this on your iOS devices. However, I would say that you can use QuickTime, and that's free. So I just use QuickTime first. So It's got a bunch of different options. Like I'm not going to get into it today because obviously the stream's only 2 hours. But you can do things like replication between this phone and a server, and it will go through and replicate all the information and grab information from the server and replicate back and forth. That's part of the product called Couchbase, which is I'm a developer advocate at Couchbase. So that's something that our product can do when you do embedded databases. We probably won't get into all that today. In fact, today we'll probably just get into the point of trying to make that login screen work. Maybe get an authentication service up on a couple other things, and then we'll start building the other screens as we kind of bolt onto this. A little history for me, real quick. I've been a mobile developer since 2011. Did a lot of Cocoa development back in the old days, back when really long time ago. Obviously, that's almost 10 years. Well, it is 10 years now. And moved to Xamarin in about 2013 or 14. Did a lot of Xamarin native development for both iOS and Android. And it's the same API, right? And at least it used to be in Xamarin. Before Xamarin Forms, you could do like a UI table view. In fact, you could use storyboards with it. And if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see that like in 2012, I did a bunch of videos of exactly that. I showed people how to take storyboards and build a Xamarin application using the Cocoa APIs, or the UIKit APIs, as we come to call them now. Cocoa is more of the foundation framework behind all the magic. And then moved on to Xamarin for quite a bit, and then went back to native and did some native stuff. And now I've recently switched jobs over to work at Couchbase here in the last 6 months, and got back into native development. So Kotlin is something that was new to me. Built this app. I've known Kotlin for about 6 months, maybe, well, a little bit longer than that, probably about a year. I've known Kotlin and really like the language a lot. It looks a lot like Swift, folks. If you look at this code and you look at some of the syntax of it, it looks a lot like Swift, which is kind of cool. And the only preference I'm going to say is that you're probably going to see me write a lot of Kotlin code in Swift, because switching between these two languages can be confusing sometimes. And I do it all the time. So I've written other Swift apps, and that tends to happen. So with that out of the way, we've kind of got an idea of what we're going to work on today. Chat is open. If you have any questions, go ahead and fire it off to me. And if you're watching on video demand, obviously you can hit up the chat there. This will be posted on GitHub, and you'll be able to get to the repo. I'll post a link out there to it, and you'll be able to go through and also use the GitHub issues or the discussion boards in GitHub. Well, that's something new that most people don't know about. So first I'm going to terminate this Android application. Then we're going to use Swift. We're going to use Xcode. So this is Android Studio. I'm going to go ahead and close that off. And then we're going to close the Android simulator here. Now, one thing I want to bring up is that I think GitHub's a better way to communicate with people. So in any of my projects, you're going to be able to just go to GitHub and be able to use the new discussions feature. So in GitHub, you can see here, I've got some work stuff there, but I'm just going to go to my area. So let's go to my profile here. And you can kind of see here, so for example, where's my Kotlin app? So this is the Kotlin version. And if you want to ask questions on it, you can just click discussions, and you can just add a new question on the discussion form. And it tracks it in GitHub. It makes it so everything's a nice, neat one spot. And maybe you're questioning some of the code, you can link directly to the line number in here. It's pretty cool. Obviously, if you find a bug in the code, if you're reading it, you can put an issue in. So GitHub is pretty great. And you'll be able to use that if you want to interact or have questions or anything like that. If you're watching this video on demand, of course. If you're live and you have questions, just throw it in the chat. All right, let's see here. So let's get started by opening up Xcode. So we're going to be using Xcode 12.5.1 today. I do have Xcode 13 installed, but I am finding that Xcode 13 is pretty painful. I think everybody would agree with that it just takes forever to launch, and the telesense sometimes breaks. It's just not been fun. So let's go ahead, and I'm literally going to start this like cold turkey, like brand new app. So I'm going to say iOS. I'm looking to make a app. That seems like it's right. And let's go next. And so we're going to call this inventory. And for right now, we'll keep this naming. Okay, we're going to do storyboards, app, UIKit, Swift. All this seems good so far. Let's go ahead and click the magic sauce here and see here. I'm going to put this in a folder on my computer. Let's see here, developer. I want it in developer. Nope. developer. That's weird. Why is it? Why is it not, do I have a gremlin here? Next. I want to go one folder up. Huh. That's weird. Xcode won't let me go one folder up. I click in here. Oh, there it goes. Just a little slow, I guess. I'm not sure why Xcode is doing this. This is weird. It is slower than dirt. And we want to put it in this one in the source folder. Let's go ahead and create. And here I was giving Xcode 12 credit for being fast, and for whatever reason, I mean, I literally was just working on a project earlier today, and it was not this slow. So I'm not sure what's going on there with it. Let's go ahead and get this. See if we can get this just set up so that we can I'm gonna use an iPhone 12 mini for my simulator. That's always what I like to do. So we have let's see here. We should have an app delegate. App delegate should just have a couple methods in it for lifecycle management. Let's see here. That looks good. And of course, this is scenes now based because we can have multi windows because of iPad or iPad OS. So you'll have a scene for those that are new to iOS development. Usually the defaults are pretty okay to at least get you started. And then it looks like it starts us with a single view controller. Let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Make sure that the universe is okay and that we are one with the universe. See if the simulator even comes up in the first place. And then we'll get into hacking some storyboard files here and see what happens. And I'm going to guess it's going to take a few seconds here. I'm going to just make sure I don't have anything else running that could possibly be killing CPU juice, because something's weird going on here where Xcode is just either being slow today or something, because it wasn't that slow earlier. But yet now it just seems to be acting up. We'll see here. Simulator starting. Let me just go through and see what else I have running. Make sure that I don't have anything running that could be killing performance. Let me close that and that. Did have a couple things running here that could possibly be causing some performance degradation, so we're gonna just close this real quick. So we should start out with just a, technically speaking, pretty much a blank screen. Apple, your tutorial or your hello world should probably come up with a message or something. Let's see here. Or do like a different splash screen color and then come up to hello world and stuff. Instead of just blank and nothingness. Let's go look at our storyboard file and see what we have. So right now we have white screen of nothing. Not all that useful, to tell you the truth. Let's take a look at the main storyboard. So, well, launch screen. So launch screen should be the storyboard file for the launch screen. And you can see here it says plain old white. So that's my fault because I didn't go through and make it something more interesting. We can see here that the background is this. Now, what I should be able to do, and what I forgot to do, was to get my colors open, because I wanted to have all my colors, so I could steal those from Android, because I've got this already running in Android, right? So one thing is that in Jetpack Compose, there's themes support inside of it. So I'm going to relaunch Android Studio. Although I don't really want to kill this Mac. I'm going to relaunch it. I'm going to grab, or I'm going to open up my theme file in there, because that way I can steal the colors. I can just start working on this right away. So let's do that, because I don't remember the color names, to tell you the truth, or the codes for each one of the colors. And since I already have those defined, why wouldn't I not just reuse those? I'm going to try to use storyboards as much as possible with UIKit, which I know there's probably some people asking that. And Swift UI, I think, is pretty cool. But there are a lot of developers out there still using UIKit with storyboards and constraints. And so I say, do whatever your team's doing. I would love to work on just Swift UI exclusively, but it's okay. It's still got some issues, I think. There's just weird things that I read about people. I don't use it a lot. I've built a couple of POC apps with it, and I think I find that I found workarounds for most of the things. I find that the oh, what do they call it now? The replacement for the columns in iPad. I can't remember what the heck it's called now. It's not Stack View. Basically, your multi-window at the same time open on iPad. I find that that is kind of buggy. UI split view, I think, is what it's called, and UIKit. I found that in Swift UI, be able to like programmatically tell it which one to start on and stuff. I found that to be kind of painful in Swift UI. Where in UIKit, that's pretty easy to override. The documentation is pretty good there, and you can kind of tell it to do anything you want. You may have to send messages back and forth between the your view over here, your details screen, and your screen, your main view that's kind of listing your menu or whatever you want over there. But I think it's pretty okay. Let's see here. So inside of Android, there is something called UI theme. Inside of UI theme, there should be a color file. I'm going to just load this off to a different part of my screen. But the theory would be is that I would have the colors for what I need in here. Now, why is that? That doesn't seem like it. Oh, because I need the theme file. There it is. So these should give me some ideas of the colors. Although that doesn't, technically speaking, look right to me. I'm defining purple when I know for a fact that the color that I want is red. That's weird. I'm going to load that off to the other side of the screen here. And that way I can just kind of use it to find those colors. That's weird. I wonder why it says purple when I know for a fact that I used a red color. Huh. Well, so what we should be able to do here is for background is see this little plus sign, which is kind of neat. You can kind of introduce a variation of colors, and you basically can say, hey, you know, what are you running this thing on? You can give it different types of colors on the background. So, for example, if I just want it to be red, there's red. Okay. And you can then, like I said, when you hit these pluses, you can make a variant of that. So maybe different screen sizes. For example, compact is small. So width of compact would be phone. Width of regular would be tablet usually. Height regular could be phone. Obviously compact is definitely phone, but it could be phone or it could be tablet. And so these are kind of constraints that you can put in that you can try to figure out the screen size so that you can change your UI based on that. So for example, on a iPhone mini, you wouldn't want split view, right? Because you just can't see a lot. At least you wouldn't want it per se on this screen here. And usually it will automatically fold into like UI navigation controller, and it'll navigate between the screens. And it does that dynamically, which is pretty awesome, to tell you the truth. iOS, it does a lot of magic behind the scenes, especially for using storyboard files that I really do enjoy quite a bit. Now, one thing I don't know, which I've never done, because the last time I did storyboard files was quite a while ago, and I know how to do this in SwiftUI, but I don't know how to do dark mode versus light mode. And I don't see an option for it here, which is kind of interesting. I thought for sure that I could hit here and say like a mode and be able to do that. And I don't see any way to, that's really interesting. UIKit, I'm going to Google that real quick. UIKit, iOS, background, color, dark mode. And where does Apple say to do this at? They say it's in the inspector. I really don't see it here. Got some Apple documentation open. select my view. So over here, if you've never used it before, by the way, so this is our UI. This is all the things that are in the UI, all the controls and that kind of stuff. So this is a view controller, and we've got a view inside of that. And then safe areas are the ability to have the both the camera bump at the top and then your virtual home button at the bottom. You know, your safe area guarantees that you don't accidentally draw something on those, so you can't interact with those virtual things. And that's why we have the safe area. You can attach your constraints, we call it, to that safe area. And that's why those exist. But I thought for sure there would be an option in here that says, you know, in here they say appearance is it called. And they say an appearance, oh, I see what they're, oh, okay, so it's almost the same thing. I take that back. There is a way to do it, and it's an asset. They're saying in here, you basically make a color inside of here. So I should be able to say new color set. And I can say then, we'll say background. We'll call it, what do we want to call this? We want to call this, this is our splash screen. So splash screen. And you can see here, this is any appearance, and then this is dark appearance. So for both of these, we probably want the same color, to tell you the truth. And then what should be able to happen is that when we go into here, see that we can set the color then. And that makes sense. So you just go to this little switch icon, and you can say it's universal versus one platform or the other. And then we can just set the color to whatever we want. Then we just go through, once we set this, so this is something called an asset, and I think these used to be called asset catalog, but now, yeah, asset catalog. And so this is just basically a bunch of assets that you can use, colors and images and all kinds of crazy things. This is pretty cool, the fact that you can just use it in here. We define it in here, and then we point to it in our storyboard file on that view. It should pull this color from whatever here and automatically change. Let's try that and see what happens here. So what I should be able to do is let me get a color real quick here. Let's see here. So for this, let's start with saying that the dark mode, let's just make it completely gray, I guess. And there's all kinds of different colors you can do here, as you can see here. So let's make it just black to see if that works. And then over here, we'll make it white. That seems like it logically makes sense. And we're calling this splash screen. So what we should be able to do here is say, instead of this, we have this view. We want to say background color instead of system color. We should be able to do, is it under custom? Normally you would get the ability to set it, but now I'm looking here and I don't see, I wonder if I have to do that via code. Because I don't see the option. And custom basically just gives me the crayon kit. As you can see here, this is just the red that it's got picked. But normally, let's click the plus here. I'm guessing I'm going to have to do this via code. But then the other issue is, I do remember this, is that you can't run like dynamic code on the splash because it's fact that it's you can't like run animations, for example, because of the fact it's trying to start the application up, so it only comes up for a second. And so for that, let's just do this. Let's do yeah, let's just leave it right and see what happens. And then I think what we'll do is we'll do the main login screen, which we're going to do first, and we'll try to get that working with dark mode. Because now I realize that I do remember that, wow. Did I do them wrong? That's launch. Where is regular view model controller right here? So let's go to our main storyboard file. So this should be main storyboard right here. You see here we've got a view. And let's make this background gray. Let's just stop the simulator from running. Start it. Bring the simulator back up. Altered. Can you stay up, please? There we go. So we can click the home icon twice to cause all the apps running to go up. Let me close everything I've got on here. I've got a bunch of different apps I've been working on. So let me just close a bunch of these other ones. Get back over here, go to inventory. So there we go, red and then gray. So that's working the way that it should. The splash screen comes up red. And you can put like a logo on there and stuff, for example. And that's a cool way to do it to kind of get you started. And I've done that. You saw, I think, a couple other apps I had on here that I've done that with before in the past. And then gray. So if I remember right now from doing this, I'm not 100% convinced that the splash screen is the first place to do that. Probably keep that just a dark color with logo. But this should be our login screen. So this is where we definitely would want to start looking at the option of loading in different colors based on our storyboard file, or excuse me, based on our asset catalog. I'm just looking to see here. So this is where we can add things like so if you go up the navigation tree here, we have a safe area, then we have a view and a view controller. So if you're new to iOS, view controllers run the view. Okay, it's a MVC, model control viewer. So the controller kind of is the orchestrator between the model and the view. Now there's other frameworks out there like RX Swift that will add bindings, and I probably should add something like that in. And there's another framework called Combine that Apple has written. All these come into like adding view models and adding patterns around segregating your view code away from your model code. And really all this comes down to is trying to make it so your code's easier to test. And usually make your code a little bit more stable because you're separating concerns. If you just throw everything in one file, it's kind of chaos. And when you're trying to manage that app long term, it can be a pain in the butt, to tell you the truth. So a lot of times we try to segregate our code for one, to make it more testable, but then two, also to make it so that it's easier to manage, which is an important thing. Let's see here. So the view controller, this is the storyboard ID. So if you need to call this view controller out from the storyboard, like via code, you need to add a storyboard ID in here. Now, normally what I do is I rename this thing right away to something outside of view controller. And I probably need to do that. So I'm going to refactor this and rename this. This is going to be called login view controller. And I'm going to right away just start going to town here and starting to set up this project the way that I normally set up most projects. So I'm going to add in a new group. I'm going to call this features. And every development team will set up their code differently, right? I'm not gonna preach to you and say that there's one way versus another. However, I am going to write this. I'm going to set up my project in the way that I like to do development. So I'm going to do another group in here, and this is going to be called login. And then what's going to happen is our login view controller is going to go inside there. And anything, the view model will also go in there. And so what I've done is I'm going to take each screen almost like a feature and then put all the stuff that is related with that in a single folder. The beautiful thing is that if I'm working on the login view and I'm trying to figure out like in the UI what's going on with that, really, I know that the view controller, maybe a service that's talking to it, all that stuff is in one spot and it's not all over the place. And I'm not trying to find in my ID, where did I put these files at? That's what ends up happening a lot of times in code structure when you get really big projects. That makes it really hard to find. So we know we're going to have a login view controller here. And then the only other thing is in our storyboard file, we have to make sure that we tell it that this screen is now login view controller. So if we look here, it should have automatically refactored that so you can see the name here. And I normally do this. I'm kind of a stickler like that, is I like to just put my storyboard ID and make it the same name as my class. That way I don't have to think about this all that hard. So the one thing I was looking at to see whether or not I could see, like, I see the colors here, but one thing I didn't see still is the ability to set it. Let's So let's just do this. I'll Google it real quick. iOS UIKit set color based on asset catalog. Somebody has it in here, but it's all they're saying all Swift code. Okay, they're saying that you go to they're saying that it shows up and in here, but I don't see it. Like I see background in here, but I don't see the color option to select from that. If I say custom, it gives me the old crayon kit, but I don't see the option of selecting from my I don't want grayscale. It doesn't give me the option to select from my asset catalog. I don't see the color in there either. This will just make it white. That's really weird. Well, I'm not going to get stuck on this too long. Let's see here, because nobody wants to watch me just fight colors. See, the weird thing is it says that, wait, is this Swift UI directions? Instead of storyboard. Storyboard. I'm assuming nobody in the chat knows how to do this. How to use asset catalog names and colors. Yes, that's what I'm trying to do here. Apple documentation, tell me what's going on here. I did make my asset catalog, and then what does it say? Name, color set, and interface builder. Interface builder color will appear in the color pop-up menu under name categories. It says it shows up. If I click here, oh, it does. Huh, there it is. I had it selected right there, name color. So this comes from the asset catalog. Aha. So what that says is that in asset catalog, here is my splash screen color. And I am saying for this to be there and for this to be here. So let's say that this is splash screen. Let's make another one called, so this would be, let's see, this is the login window. And so the login window should have the main color. So let's make a new color set and call this main view, main background color. And we'll say for any appearance it's going to be white, and for dark mode we're going to make it a gray color. So let's go in here, find a good, there is usually a system gray that's pretty decent for, I want it a little bit darker than that though. Let's try to make it, that looks pretty decent. And now we should see main background inside of the storyboard. So let's go back over here to login view controller. Oop, that's our code. Go back to our main storyboard. So now in here in our view, we're going to go back to our properties. Clicking on view once here. And now I should see main background color. There it is. Now I do believe you can toggle in here the which mode you want to be in. And I think it's under the, I know in the emulator there's an option to basically toggle between dark mode and light mode. View, editor, let's see, that's not it. Debug area, show library, that's not what I want. There's usually a way, I thought, to toggle in here, dark versus light mode. These are all of our constraints and stuff. I know that down here, this is where you can change your phone, like view as iPhone. And you'd think that right here, this gives you all the constraints. So if you've never done storyboards, this can get really complicated fast. So these are all the different devices you can test on. You can basically set like what orientation and stuff do you want this to be, so you can figure out the constraints for it, which is we're about to get into, because we need to bring a view into here. And then that view, we're going to probably want a different color. If we look at, where's my Android version of the app? I want to say that the been a while since I did the Android version of the app, but I want to say that the box inside of the login is a certain color. No, it's not. I didn't make a color inside of it. I just made it all flat, so it's all just one color. But normally you could put like a little square in there and make it look nice and have it popped out and stuff. And I think we'll probably want to do that in here. Now to do that, we have to add in a view. Now, and then we'll have to add some constraints. So this little plus sign up here, so you add controls in, and then it gives you this little search window that you can search for. And this is something we call view. And we can add something called a stack view when you want to add views on top of views. And so a stack view is these horizontal and vertical stacks. These are two of the most popular things you would want to do. They automatically can grow your contents based on the screen size and stuff. But sometimes if you just only have one real view in your whole entire thing, you could just use what they call UI view, just a regular good old view, and have that just embedded inside your view. So I can just say I want another view and drag that out here. And it's there. Now the problem is going to be is we can't tell the difference if the view background color is the same as the background view, right? So we have two views. We have this view and we have the view inside of it. And so that's normally when you change the background color of this to a different color, right? So let's go back here and then say for this, let's make it either black or red to start out with so that we can see the difference on the main background screen. So let's go into our colors here. Let's make this a red. And now if we were to go back to our storyboard file, we should see that that's red with a white kind of box on it. Now, out of the gate, this is going to get really tricky real quick. Like, how do you guarantee this looks great for all devices? You know, that's honestly, this is the thing that you will probably struggle all the time with as a mobile developer. So, for example, do I want to make it this big and stuff? I'm going to cheat a little bit. I wouldn't say cheat. That's a bad word. So if you look here as I'm dragging, iOS is also kind of giving me some like guidance, like how, see that little blue line? That's telling me like the margin basically. It's trying to tell me what they think would look good if I make it that. So this is basically could be a box now that I have my controls inside of. I can put a logo up there first, and I can eventually round the corners and make it look all fancy and neat. But to start out with, the real problem is going to be is if I switch devices, this thing is not going to know how to shrink and grow based on the screen size. And what I mean by that is if I were to automatically switch over to a different screen size, for say for example tablet here, look at that. The square's all screwed up. That's not cool, right? I didn't expect that to happen. Well, I did expect that to happen, but if you're a new developer, you're like, well, wait a minute, that didn't work the way I wanted it to. It should be like when I was on that phone. And I went to a different phone, and now it looks even different, right? So it's like, wait a minute. Now you're back at the phone that you originally threw the square on, and it looks all right, but it still doesn't seem like it's right. So how do we solve these problems? Well, that's what we call constraints. And constraints are this little couple different icons down here that we can add in to tell it, like, how do we want this box inside of this view to interact? So we have a view inside of a view. What we want to do is we want to put some rules that says this view should interact with the outside view, that's its parent view, we call it, in a certain way. So one, we can put some constraints on left and right. And so you can see here that we're going to say that the left and right, we're going to constrain so that the box will always be at least 20 pixels from the left side of the screen and 20 pixels from the right side of the screen. Now these actually are trailing and leading. That's the name for them in constraints, which is really kind of confusing at first. If you're new to Swift development, you're like, what is leading and trailing? Well, you would be normally used to start and end, or the words left and right. But the problem is we have languages that don't read from left to right. They read from right to left. So leading and trailing is the words that Apple came up with so that you can understand leading just simply means this thing is starting. And it doesn't matter if it's reading left to right or left to right or right to left. And then trailing is basically the end or the thing after it. And by doing those two words, they made it so that as long as you define these, technically speaking, your app should automatically dynamically move between right and left and left to right languages. So if you set up your constraints and everything right, your app actually is pretty cool, at least in iOS. Though in the later versions of Android, at least with Jetpack Compose, you can do this also. And in Android prior versions, you can still do it, but it's a little bit more work. You have to do a bunch of resource files and stuff, which is not my cup of tea. But so how do I set these constraints in? So one, I'm going to set a constraint by hitting this little red bar. These little red bars tells it to anchor to this part of the screen, 20 pixels over. So now it no longer matters how big or small my screen grows. That box is always going to be anchored 20 pixels over. Now 20 pixels is a lot. I'm actually going to make that a little bit more so that I can make it a thinner box. So let's try 40 pixels. Oop. I meant to hit the set on that and I did not. So you have to have your view control, your view that you want to constrain. So right here is the little box inside of the box. You have to click this icon here, and then you have to make sure you hit the set icon. If you don't hit the set icon, it will not set those. So I'm going to put 40 in here, 40 in here. You'll see the two red lines right now, and you'll say constraint to markets, and I'm going to add those two constraints. Now you can instantly see the box shrunk down, right? But the thing that should happen is if when I go to tablet, the box should stay the same size. See how it grew and how it shrunk? So it's now smart enough to know that it's constrained to that screen size. And so because of that, it kind of has a calculation to know how big to make itself. Now the problem is the width and the height now. And the height, so normally what would happen is in this world is I would constrain the width and height to I'd constrain the height to a certain height on a login window, regardless to whether it's on a tablet or not. And some people would even argue that you do it with with the width, that you can add that constraint in. So instead, you could have what we call a width and a height constraint. Okay, and so that's another option. So if I didn't want that previous constraint, now the problem is that these constraints are already there, and you have to see that they're right here. So for example, if I want to change these constraints, this is where you change them. You can't go back down to the editor because they're already set. And if you were to try to go down to the editor, it'd make two more constraints. And that would get really frustrating because you're trying to fight like all these different constraints and figure out what the heck's going on in the universe. So that's something that I can definitely tell you over a period of time. Learning how to edit your constraints is really kind of one of the magic tricks to this. So you can see here, I've got two constraints here. Now, if I wanted to do it hard-coded, where I'm going to say it needs to be a certain width and a certain height, regardless, and then center it in the screen, which is another cool option, I could do that. I can delete these two constraints, select my box again, but instead of doing the attach to the screen, I can say my width is always going to be 200 pixels and my height is always going to be 400 pixels. Now these are some pretty normal numbers, right? And that should, technically speaking, get me a box that regardless should be the same size. So now if I go to my iPad, you'll see here that it's still the same size. And if I go to my phone, it's still the same size. If I go to my super dinky phone, it's still the same size. Now, of course, now it's too big for the entire screen. It looks like in this really small, I don't even know what that is, that iPhone SE. So the iPhone SE is giving us iPhone 4S. Well, we don't care about the iPhone S. We care about the SE second generation. We're going to say we only want second generation and higher. So if I were to move this up, does this work on the SE? That does. That would technically speaking work. So now we only have one last problem, is that we need to get this to center horizontally and vertically, right? So if we go back to our view, we need also that option. Now, what we could do is we could say add missing constraints, and you could ask Apple to just kind of take a best guess of what you were looking for. That sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, to tell you the truth. I have been burnt by that before, but there is this option for alignment, which is super cool. Now, this gives you the ability to say, hey, just horizontally center in my container and horizontally vertically in my container. What this will do is it's just going to say, hey, I know the big box, the size. Now just make this thing horizontally centered and vertically centered. So I'm going to add those two constraints in. And instantly now we have a totally different picture here. We can see here that regardless of the device size, my box will stay in the center at all times. Now, the only issue I have now is the constraint has somehow ate my first constraint, which was on the width and height. So that, look here, if you look here, we've got our two center constraints, but we don't have our width and height anymore. So we need to add those two constraints back because we want the ability to say that this is 200 by 400. So we'll add those two constraints. And I did not add them. Oh, I add them on the view. And now they're there twice. See what I meant? Where if you go into the editor, you add them twice, they're there. So let's see here. So this is because it's constrained against the parent. See, I don't want to do it there. I definitely want to do it here. It needs to be. Will this work? Let's run it on the mini now and see. The UI is not leading me to believe that the constraints is working because the update is showing this thing way too thin, right? And if we put a text box in there, it's not going to work. Yeah, see, there it is. So you can see here, I would expect this to be more than that, unless that is 200 pixels. Well, there's one way to find out. We can just stop this. Go into our constraint. Instead of 200, let's make it 400. Oh, it is working. So that was 200. Let's make it 300 then. 300 looks a little bit more decent. Let's make it 320. That looks pretty decent. Let's see what happens if we switch it over to a bigger phone, smaller phone. Seems like it's working. So it was working. The constraint was working the entire time. The only problem was I basically just had it 200 pixels. It wasn't enough that I liked the look of it. So right here we have our iPhone mini. Let's boot it back up. And then let's look at it in dark mode and see whether or not. We should be able to switch it dynamically. There is a feature in here. Where is it? Device. There is a toggle for it. Oh boy. I'm so used to, I just worked in this Kotlin app. I'm so used to Kotlin that I don't remember. I guess you can go into the simulator and change it in the system settings, but I bet you maybe it's here. I don't want to move it to. There it is. Toggle appearances. Command Shift D to toggle between light mode and dark mode. Well, folks. Command Shift D. It is. And that didn't work. So it said it was supposed to do, but it did not switch my modes. Or either it did, and my colors are not switching, right? That's the other. I guess there's two options in here. Either that didn't work, or the colors are not getting set right. Let's see here, preferences. I don't see it in there either. So this should automatically know if we switch left to right and stuff. It should know our box size. So it should automatically switch on that. So our constraint's definitely working because when we switched over here, you can see it remembered that. Now, this is where you can change the login box based on how the phone's oriented. So we can give it a different height based on if it's vertical versus horizontal. And that's probably a good option to do. Otherwise, if somebody switches it vertical, although who the heck would log in vertically? I guess the keyboard is bigger. I can see that happening. Or iPad would be the more likelihood. Is that when they're on an iPad, they can do that. And we can also change the size based on the screen size. But these are all cool options. I'm a little disturbed that didn't work though. That might could Command Shift B. I've tried it every, well, that gives me the ability to see my mouse and where my finger would be on the screen. That's definitely not it. Well, look at that. For some reason, can I do this? Can I go into the system preferences and just change it to dark mode? And general. Don't see the option. I don't see the display option in here for it either. Huh. Developer. Dark appearance. Well, there it is. Well, dark mode's definitely working, because if we look here, and this is what it looked like in dark mode. Now, I wanted that still to be white, so that's the very first bug I have, is that it's definitely not running in the color that I wanted for this, but I haven't really told the view what to be. And so let's go ahead and do that here. So this view, we said system background color. That's the problem. Instead of just saying that we want it to always be white. That should fix that. So if we were to rerun that now in the simulator, it should always be white regardless. So that was my fault for picking the wrong color. So you can see there, that looks right. That looks better. Okay. So what we could do is, let's check some controls out and then see how they look on the screen and start interacting with it. So let's grab in a text field. We're going to add 2 of these onto the screen here. And it gives you these really great blue highlight lines that kind of gives you an idea of where the control should be, which is super helpful when you're trying to get like pixel perfect and make it look nice. And so you can do things like you can copy and paste, so we can have 2 controls like that. And then there's arguments of whether or not you should have a box above it that tells it what the box is, like the text box is, or do you just have a placeholder, it's called, right? And these can be done a couple different ways. So one thing you could do is put username in here and then put password in here. And the theory would be is that when they type in the text, it'll automatically replace it. That's an option, right? And so that makes it pretty easy. Let's also add a button, a login button. So you can just basically add it in and drag it in here. It's kind of like SwiftUI, except for you're just dragging and dropping. And SwiftUI offers this, so I mean, there's very similar. If you ask me, there's a lot of similarities between these two. The biggest thing is in here, you're doing a lot of constraints button. And I could make, I don't want that button, I want that login. I could make this where this was just in a stack layout, and then technically speaking, just tell it to make them equal. It'd be there and kind of cool. But I'm looking for a more different UI. So I'm not going to use the stack layout. I'm going to force my UI to be a certain way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some real estate up here for a logo. You know, what I want is a logo up here, username, password box. So once again, our constraints are not going to be the issue. And if we don't, well, let's watch what happens if we don't constraint this. So let's go to iPad. So actually, technically speaking, since this view, I constrained it already, this is probably, for the most part, probably going to work until we flip it vertically. And when we flip it vertically, that's probably when we're going to have the issue. And honestly, even there, it's probably going to be fine. It's vertical when we do like a mini phone. Let's go to phone here and do orientation to vertical. Yeah, so see the login button's cut out now. Now, of course, that's not a pretty small phone, but still, it's still not to my liking even here, right? This is, well, that's actually pretty close to being okay, but we're getting pretty close to the safe area, which is not cool. So we'd probably need to take a look at, on vertical, making the height smaller so that the login button still works, or disable vertical mode altogether. And that's another thing that some people do. They'll basically go in for iPhone and disable it so that you can't do orientations a certain way. Couple different ways to do this, you know, and each one of those has a user experience issue at hand, if you ask me. So most people don't understand about constraints. Constraints is just about giving iOS enough information to be able to say that it knows where to draw this particular thing. That's a goal with constraints. And so some people think that you need to connect this to like all the corners, like, you know, the left, the right, the top, and the bottom need to be connected. That's not true. In constraints, as long as it's like an algebra formula. You know, A plus B equals C. Well, if you don't know B, you can subtract C from A and get B's value. When the constraint system, as long as it knows how enough information about everybody else, if it's missing a couple values, it can calculate those dynamically. And that's cool. And so that's something to be known about that I think people take and they mess up. They think that it's a certain way when it's not. So for example, I can just say always make this login 20 pixels from the bottom. And then what I also want to do, so add that constraint. And then what I also want to do is I want to say just center horizontally and add that constraint. That's enough. So technically speaking, I don't have all the constraints, or I don't have it set up like fully, but I've told it, hey, set me up 20 pixels from the bottom, and then make sure horizontally I should be centered. So that should work, and it should guarantee that no matter the size of this box, login should automatically come for free and switch itself so it's always 20 pixels from the bottom. And in fact, we could check that by saying on our view here, when we look at our constraints, here's our constraints right here, right? But our constraint is for the size of compact and regular. So let's take a look at this and see if we can maybe make this a little bit different. So this is the width. The width I think I'm still okay with. It's the height that I'm concerned about on a smaller phone, right? So let's say what happens if the height is also compact. Well, in that case, what we want to do is we want to make this 200. Ooh, see, now look it. See the login box, the two text boxes were not updated, so they don't grow right. Let's make it 300. Oh, so we have to add the variation. I forgot to hit the add the variation. So let's go compact, and add 300 as a variation. And then what we want to do is we want to say when we're compact regular, accidentally click there. So what we want to say is this is going to be 400 when it's regular compact. So add that variation. So we're saying when width is compact and height is regular, 400. When width is compact and height is compact, it's 300. And by doing that, what we should do is when the phone goes vertically, like this, we should be able to dynamically update ourselves. Now, of course, the real problem, though, is that the text box, the username and password, they don't have the ability to calculate where they should be on the screen. So we should make another... I accidentally clicked the wrong thing. I didn't want to make two of those windows open. I wanted to hit the plus sign above. Instead, what we want is we want a UI image view. Image view. Let's bring this up. This is going to be our eventual logo, right? So let's just drag this out for right now. We'll put some constraints on this also, and then we can kind of get this thing all compiled together in constraint land. This is the hardest part of iOS UIKit. If you can figure out like how to do constraints and stuff, you are a god and you can work on any project because the code is code. I mean, code is easy. This is usually the parts that most developers that I've worked with in my career have struggled with. So I'm going to say that the logo is going to be 100 by 100. I'm going to add those two constraints in. So that's going to guarantee it that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a constraint that it must be always 20 pixels from the top. But I told it the wrong constraint. Undo. Oh. I'll also make this bigger so we can see all of our stuff here. So our UI image view somehow, I didn't drag it into this view, so that's the problem. There it goes. So now let's look at our constraint again. So what we want to do is we have a constraint to width and height. But now I think the problem is that we have an accidental constraint on the so that's login center. I accidentally added that constraint 20 pixels on the that's login. width and height. Maybe it undid it when I moved it. So that's the view. This is the constraint for. So let's add this, and let's add a constraint into 20 pixels from its parent. That should add it to whatever its parent is. There we go. Views without layouts clip, yes, they draw on top of each other. We are fully aware of that. And this, then, we just want to add another constraint in that says we want it to be horizontally in the container. And magic sauce, that's 100 by 100. Now it's going to be 20 pixels from the top, centered. Now, we don't know how big this box is, and we really don't care. But what we want to do is we want to say that this text box is a certain distance from this box. Now, this is where the trick of the magic comes in. And once you get this, the rest is pretty cool. So one, let's go in and add a constraint that says this is always going to be 16 pixels on each side. We're going to add those two constraints. That gives us a little spacing, and that looks natural. 16 pixels or points used to be the default for UI table view cell. And so I don't know if you knew that or not, but in a table view cell, if you look at the defaults, they come with 4 different cells that are out of the box. And 16 used to be that number, the default number over. And that's how I know that's one of the magic numbers in iOS. That looks pretty good. If you use 16 pixels for margin, you're almost guaranteed it's always going to look pretty native. Pretty much like any Apple app or meets the HID requirements. That's the human interface design its elements. So I'm going to do that for password also. I'm going to go in and add a constraint there. So, I mean, while we're in here, might as well do it, right? So let's add 16 here. And I think you'll see what I'm cooking here in a second. Oops, not 108, 116. You can go crazy with these constraints. We're going to add that constraint there. We're also going to add the same constraint to make it horizontally aligned. Add that constraint there. Magic sauce. So now all we have to do is we have to get the padding between these done, the margin, or not padding, margin. We want to say, hey, we want these always to be a certain distance from each other. So what I can do is I can drag. Now I'm going to hold down a key on my keyboard, and the different keys do different things, okay? So one, if you look there, I'm holding down the command key right now, and it gives me this little glove. But if I hold down this key, you'll see here, this is my control key. It gives me a different set. It gives me like a set of options, and then Alt will give you yet another. That duplicates it, right? So that would duplicate the control if you do Alt. I don't want that. So instead what I want to do is I want to go in and drag from this to this. And I'm holding down Control right now on my keyboard. And you can see here, it gives me a list of things I want to do. Now what I want to do is I want to say vertical spacing. How far vertically are these from each other? I want to put a constraint in for that. I want to guarantee whatever currently is that value to do that. And now there it is. So that's going to add vertical space in between these two. And if I click on that little blue one, it should show me the actual constraint that is. So you can see here, this is saying image view bottom to username top. And right now it's saying 48 pixels. Well, 48's not a great number. I mean, it's honestly binary, right? I mean, 32 and 16 will get you 48. So it's a good binary number. So I'm not selling that short of that. 32 and 16 gives me 48. But it's probably not one that a designer is going to say that looks good, right? So I'd probably clean that up to be 40. Because usually when I got designs, we usually call these red lines from a designer. They would always have like certain pixel numbers, and they always were like 10, 20, 30, 40. Never were they binary friendly, like how us developers think. So I've got that pretty good. And now all I need to do is I need to put space in between my username and password box. I guarantee that they will automatically say space in between themselves also. So I can just drag between these two and say vertical spacing. What this will do is it'll put a constraint between the username and password box now. And if you look here, this is that constraint. And it's also set to 42. I'd like to be this always 40. Now, normally, I would actually do something like that. I'd make the boxes pretty close to each other, or even like 30, so that when you're tapping, you don't have to scroll to get to the next box and tap into it. That looks pretty okay from a UI standpoint. what our sniff test we want to be able to do is see whether or not it passes the ability to, when we start moving devices, does it automatically grow and shrink as we need to. That looks pretty good. But what happens if I do the orientation and look, it switched? It's still, all the stuff's in the spot I want it to be in. That's really what I was looking for in this. And so if I go back, to my, let's throw the device there. Let's go back to phone. I'll go back to my SE. And there's my SE on horizontal. And let's look at the orientation vertical. And you can see there, the login button now is a little bit, so this may be a little bit too much. Now I could fix that by doing a different constraint for vertical versus horizontal. That's cool, right? Let's do that. So let's take a look and see if we can do a different constraint for vertical to fix this problem. So the first problem we have is that all these need to be jacked up a little bit. Like the space in between the login and the logo is going to have to be smaller. So if we look here, we can say that right now that constraint is at 40, but it's at compact. Well, right now we're on compact, right? But that really wasn't. That was when it was compact regular. So let's go back to horizontal here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add that constraint only when it's in compact regular. And technically speaking, we'd want it regular, because it looked good there also. So we can go in and add this and say we also like it for regular there. So add that variation at 40. But when we're at compact, let's go to our orientation and change that. 40 is too much. We're going to make it only 20. Now see how we lifted up the login box? And by doing that, we're going to add in that constraint then to say on compact. So on compact regular and regular, we're going to say 40 is probably enough. We're going to say on compact, switch that to only 20 pixels, and now the password box is not on top of the login button. We should test this on a couple different phones to make sure that this theory that we have works, right? So we can switch our phone to here, switch the orientation back. Does that still look good? Yeah, it looks pretty good, right? The only other difference is this box size. If we look at it, our problem is that on here, it's just too big. The box is getting into the safe area. And so we probably need to shrink this box down a little bit on these when it goes for our orientation. So let's go back to SE. I think this is SE version 2. Is this it? Yeah, the second generation orientation here. It actually looks okay there. So why does it look so turdy here? That's a technical term, turdy. Let's go into view here and take a look. So our constraint here would be on the view itself. And if we looked at the view, it'd be the height that we'd be worried about. So see the height 400? So that's, right here it is. So it's compact regular, it's 400. Compact, it's 300. And this is what? This is regular compact. So that we don't have a constraint for this yet. Because we have compact regular, but we don't have width regular with height compact. We don't have compact, and compact regular. So let's add this variation. And this, so this is compact regular. The width isn't really compact though. It's this one. This is the compact. So it's the width is regular, but the height is compact. Let's make this 300. Ta-da. And fixed. And now the advantage is that our home button here is not getting overwritten. You know, we have enough space in there. In fact, we could even go through and say, you know what? That box could go a little bit bigger. So we could even go back if we wanted to and say, let's look at that constraint again of the height and say, you know what? For regular compact, we can go like 340. That's looking pretty okay. And that's probably going to be good enough for this app, right? So very quickly here, we're using the Storyboard Editor. We're able to kind of do all these different, screen sizes and orientations and make sure our app still looks pretty decent. Let's grab one of our tablets here, like the iPad mini. I think this is, no, regular iPad. Let's just go ahead and check orientation on there to make sure it still looks good. I mean, the iPad, it's hard to screw up, honestly. Oh, I see here that Xcode is a little cut off on the screen on the stream. I wish I would have noticed that before. Let me bring that up so it's not so bad. There we go. And hopefully I apologize for not realizing that until now. We also can take this view off the side so that we have more design real estate, and that should make this a little bit easier to see on you all. I apologize for that. That's definitely a growing pain that I just learned. That you guys may not be able to see the whole designer. That's terrible, but there we go. So we can test this now. Let's test all this on the simulator now. So let's go in and make sure that we're working pretty well. We're on an iPad or iPhone mini right now. And if we were to scroll, that looks pretty good. Now, of course, our box here looks terrible. Like our text box, we got a lot of theming colors we have to fix for dark versus light mode. But this looks like no matter what way we flip it, it looks okay. I would normally make this. By the way, I would go into my info plist file, and you can make it so that it can't go upside down. Upside down is one of those things that you just pretty much don't want to support. I promise you that it's a pain in the butt to support upside down orientation because you have the notch and this and that, and it's just not. My recommendation is you support vertical and then horizontal, proper way up, not upside down. And you're going to be fine in your apps. And there is the ability to do that. It's actually pretty easy. In your main, at least it used to be, in your main project configuration, you would say upside down right here. Just uncheck it. And if you uncheck upside down, it will not draw upside down then. And that's the secret to that. So let's go back to our storyboard file here we were kind of working with. So today, really what we're just kind of doing is trying to make our login view look pretty great in all the situations we can make it. Not great, because obviously, I mean, still need to tweak those colors a little bit. Not 100% happy with them, to tell you the truth. But for just getting this set up to start getting ready for code and stuff, this is like half the battle. It's really going through and getting all the colors working right and those kind of things. So the reason why this box, when I looked at the two login boxes, I'm going to guess that those are the color is the background color for it is set on a system color. And there are different modes also you can make the text box. You can make it indented, for example, like that. You can put a border on it. So that's indented in right there. And then you also can make it circular. And these are the border styles. And this is out-of-the-box iOS stuff. And you also could change the clear button to clear the box. And that will change the keyboard also. And you have all kinds of options for your keyboard. So, for example, here, the username box, I want this to be the keyboard type of keyboard type. I want this to have the @ symbol in it for email addresses. So I'm going to click email address there so that it comes with the @ symbol. And then for passwords, we can change the keyboard type to be secure. Where is it? Number, email address, name, phone number. There's usually an option. Secure text entry right there. Check that box. And we'll make the return key done on the password. And we can even wire this so that if they hit the done key, then it automatically clicks the login button, for example, which is something you should do. But I was thinking that the background of this right here, that's the issue at hand. It's set to default. And what we probably want to do is just make this always white.